Hey everyone, Panyo here. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of After Dinnermans. I highly encourage everyone watching to join us in the Art Blocks Discord. A link to our Discord can be found in the description of this YouTube video. As always, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss an episode of our weekly show. And now I want to introduce our guest for this afternoon. We have generative artist William Mapan.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going, William? How are you doing?
Good. The heat wave is hitting Paris,
Oh
but
yeah.
so far so good. Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, it's just the start of summer, so I hope, it gets a little bit better over time. But yeah, I don't think that's going to be the case for most of
Yeah,
the
definitely
world.
not.
Well, yeah,
Definitely not.
I want to jump right into it. We have a lot of ground to cover. And so, yeah, maybe you can kind of kick things off by telling us a little bit about your background.
Sure. Um, so I've been like for 10 years so far. I've been developing websites and installation and applications, mobile, as a creative developer mainly. So it's more or less like doing a bunch of stuff creatively and finding solutions, you know. So pretty much it. And before that, I studied um, a bunch of things like computer science and a little bit of art and animation and design, graphic design as well. So I have all these, mixed things that I studied, and then I just yeah went to another school, and then I started working in the advertising industry as a creative developer for 10 years, and then more and more I started to make my own stuff for just for me, not for clients. And at the same time, I was also like practicing a lot on the side, like traditional medium like painting, and everything else. And little by little, I started, to switch to making my own stuff and making my own art and trying to mix both worlds, like traditional and my computer skills. So
Great.
yeah, that's where I am now. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. And and you mentioned, obviously early on, you kind of experimented with, painting on the traditional side. Where were there any artists that you kind of looked up to that kind of inspired your work early on during that process?
Mm, it's mainly the old masters, basically. Like I have a bunch of books, like a lot of artists from the past, and I think they made so many stuff that we can look up. And I think there's everything we need there. So it's mostly books, and then yeah, I think like I come from the Flash era. Like I started my career when it was the end of Flash, basically. But I have all this community side where all the Flash people were sharing a lot of stuff and resources about making creative things with a computer. So it's mainly like the Flash community, I would say, and then the processing community. And I basically grew up in there. So yeah.
Okay, awesome. And obviously we're in this NFT crypto space. Like, what was your introduction? And did it make sense when you first got into NFTs and creating art for the blockchain, or is that something that took a little bit of time?
No, at first it didn't make sense at all. Like I think I first heard about NFT and crypto art around 20 late 2018, I think, maybe 19. It was mostly like some people liking my stuff on Twitter and and asking, yeah, can you mint that? And we're like, what do you mean? And I was really like curious about it, but not paying that much attention. So I just, you know, looked someone else, and I didn't get into it at that point. But then I think it was early, like in March 2020, with Ink and Nunk. At that time, I was working with Matt Delaurier, on a project, and he was getting on there, and was like, yeah, you should try it, just see how it is. So that's how I get into it. It was super wild. It was very weird platform at that time, and yeah, it sounded super not secure. I was like, what am I doing? Yeah, that's super dangerous. That's weird, but it felt fresh. So that's what I liked at that time, and that's how I got hooked. I think it was super fresh and something like it felt like a new wave of something, and a lot of the community, the creative coders community, get into it as well. So it was like a perfect circle to to fit in. So yeah, that's how I started.
Okay, excellent. And can you share with us that that first ever NFT that you minted on Hickenunk?
Yeah, sure. Let me share my screen. Oh, I was sharing all this time my screen.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. When you have the site
Uh,
pulled up, I can change the scene for us.
okay. So it was this one basically. So it's like a 3D thingy made with handmade textures. So it was mostly like an experimental thing. And because, oh wow, and because of the experimental side of Inkenlang, I wanted to put something as well experimental on my side. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna just put something experimental on the experimental platform and see what happened. And it almost got sold out instantly. So I was like, what the fuck happened? And that's how I got started. Yeah, yeah.
And
And
that's
then I started collecting other artists, and yeah, I think I just got like addicted to collecting as well. So yeah.
yeah. Started going down the rabbit hole of collecting different art, which is always fun for anyone that's just joining the space. Yeah, so I'm curious, how did you go about picking that piece that you shared with us? Is that something that you created a long time ago, or is that something you created specifically for, like, when you found about like Hickenunk and blockchain? Is that when you started creating that piece itself?
I would say it wasn't. It was something pretty like a recent. Um, like at that time, I was trying to get. I was playing with a lot of 3D because I wanted to learn 3D a bit more, but I didn't like quite much the really sharp, really clean look of 3D, and I was trying to hack this look. And I think I started this experimentation like 3 months before, like just before Hinkenek, like in January or maybe December 2019. So it was a perfect occasion to just try this out with the world and just share it. And yeah, that's yeah, it wasn't so old.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great. And so is that some piece that is that part of like a series that you want to create further down the road, or is that just kind of like a one-off that you wanted to create for Hickenunk?
Yeah, I have a bunch more. Like I think my computer is a super big mess of a lot of folders. But yeah, I don't share everything I do because I don't wanna spam people.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I have a bunch, like I think I have like 10 of these. But this one I felt it was the most like finished piece that I could, I was like I could sell it. So in I wasn't feeling that like that about the other pieces. So like, okay, well, I'm gonna just put this one on the website, and maybe if it works out, maybe I can continue and make progress on this series. But then I got hooked in a lot of things, and NFTs and crypto like came, and we're like, oh my god, no, it's too fast. And yeah, I felt a bit overwhelmed, yeah, at first. So I I I decided to step back a bit at that time.
Okay. Very cool. And was there any kind of like inspiration when you created that piece also from like other artists or other, mediums that you've kind of experienced with in the past, or is that something that kind of just developed organically over time?
Uh, I think not for a specific artist, I would say. I think I spent a lot of time, well, not that much, but I try to not that much of time on Instagram and just on artist profiles and mostly colored artists using colored pencils because I just love this medium. So I think it just kind of I just tried to translate what I was seeing on the art journey and making this on another medium with my own style and performances. So that's how it got, I think, merged in some
Mhm.
ways. But there's no specific artist, I would say. It's more about experimentation and just try to make something.
Yeah, absolutely. And where do you go to get inspiration when coding projects? I've talked to some artists in the past. Usually they reference, nature, maybe some museums, parks. But is there anywhere specific that you kind of go for the inspiration, or is it just wherever,
Oh,
life kind of takes you?
I think it's whatever inspires at one point in time. Like
Mm,
it could be anything, like literally anything. It could be something I see on Twitter, something I see in a museum, in nature, like Anticyclone. It was about the sky, clouds. Recently, I was like, oh yeah, maybe when I do this with my hand, it creates some shadows on a projected table. I was like, okay, that's interesting. Maybe I can do something with code. So it's mostly anything that I see. I think it's mostly about seeing like a big things, like I don't know if it's like a practice or something, but a big part of me is about observation and about seeing things uh, in a way that people don't at the first sight. So that's what I try to visualize and see in common things because there is beautiful things everywhere. So yeah, there's no specific things, but mostly everything.
okay, no, that makes total sense to me. So I do want to talk about Anticyclone, but first, like, how did you learn about art blocks? Was it through Matt? I know you kind of referenced him earlier on. Is that someone that kind of talked to you about art blocks and as far as
Yeah,
like inspiring you for that project?
yeah. I think first time was Matt with Meridian. No, Subscapes. Yeah, Subscapes. And it was like, yeah, I'm gonna release a project there. I was like, what is this platform? Okay, and I didn't quite get it at that time, all the long form thing because I was still in my Inkenang box, like, yeah, just upload an image. I wasn't quite understanding the whole thing with Outlook at the time, so I didn't pay that much attention. And I think it was uh, after that with Ben Kavok.
Hmm.
Um, I think that is the name. I see.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
hope I say it right. With Edifice, and I was like, okay, another project on Outlook. I was like, okay, what is this platform? I was like, okay, I need to understand now because there is too much stuff, good stuff on this platform now, and I need to grasp, like wrap my head around. And we're like, okay, that's game changing. We're like, okay, that's something. And I understood the the challenges, and I was like, okay, maybe not this year because I have too much stuff for now going on. I understand that this kind of project is really super, you know, time consuming. So like, yeah, let's try another time, maybe next year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever. But for now, it's not for me. So I just continued on Tezos and Inkenek at the time. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. That's great. Well, no, I'm really glad that you found your way back to, our blocks, and you released Anticyclones, which I do want to talk about right now. And maybe you can kind of kick things off with this part with, telling us a little bit about the concept behind this project. I know you mentioned clouds, so I don't know if that was kind of like an early concept with, how you came about this project.
Yeah, in my practice of generative art, it's all about finding things, and sometimes it's finding things in my own code and outputs. And I was, I hadn't any specific outputs in mind, but I just wanted some kind of energy going on, like rotation, some stuff going on the canvas. And I think like 1 month after of experimentation, I was like, okay, this reminds me clouds, and what I'm doing is like a good energy, a good feeling. So I started to get off of the computer and just started studying like clouds, going outside. It was beautiful at the time. So it was mostly like a back and forth between going outside and being on the computer. Like every time I was in the street, I was saying to my girlfriend, "Oh my God, look at this cloud! It's beautiful." And it, it's a bit weird, in the street, but yeah, it's how it kind of came together. It's more about iteration within the code and taking inspiration and interpreting your code with what you see. And yeah, that's how I came to that. Yeah, and then I started to put a lot of energy into white paper, like how anticyclones are made, the weather, a bunch of stuff. And I think I always do that, but it's not about um, learning deeply how it works, but more about immersing myself into a subject so I can get something out of it. And because I don't know everything, every detail, I don't constrain my head around something. I just let some doors open so it can evolve into something creative. So yeah, that's how the concept came to me.
That's cool. Yeah, it kind of sounds like you kind of let your imagination or your day-to-day life kind of, influence you in the creation of the art. It's not like you have like a set plan and you're like,
Yeah,
hey, this is what I'm doing. It's like, all right, I'll just kind of take things in stride, and eventually it'll create the project that you're building.
yeah. I think it's always like that. Very rarely it's about getting a specific output. I think those kind of situations are more about exercise and how to get a specific thing. Like this is, it becomes, like obsessive. How can I get this? But most of the time, when I create something new, it's more about letting imagination take a big part in the process. So yeah.
Okay, great. And then what's the meaning of the project name Anticyclone? What does that mean to you and for this project?
Um, at some point, or like why am I happy with cloud and sky, and why am I not happy when it's cloudy and raining? I just hate rain. It's just hate it, and it was mostly about good mood and yeah, good energy, and what is the feeling of this, and how can I put it on paper on canvas, with code. It was mostly about transmitting my interpretation of what is a good weather to me, like a good cloud, a cyclone. This is the heat, the good weather, so all these, you know, good vibes.
Yeah,
And I tried to put it in and translate it into code.
great. Yeah, and I think you just executed it really, really well, and it obviously shows. Going through all the different outputs. Whenever someone buys something on Secondary, I'm in Block Talk or something, and you just I don't know, you just continue to appreciate the project itself. And I'm curious to know, like, as far as the patterns and shapes for, creating the clouds, how do you determine that? Like, how does that? I'm not a coder myself, so I'm curious to know, like, how does that translate when you're kind of like putting the project together?
So the idea came like, when you're like above the clouds, like in the plane, or just you go on Google Maps or Earth, and you see the little clouds, like in very normal shape. And as soon there's like a tornado or an anticyclone or anything, the shape starts, to morph into something more circular. So the whole idea was like, okay, how can I do that in code? Or like, okay, I'm gonna start with super simple basic shapes like rectangles and stuff like that. And how can I deform those rectangles into shape that reminds me tornado and anticyclones and the weather phenomena. And that's how I get all those rotation, because I wanted to simulate, like interpret like the airflow within an anticyclone, because it just goes through air and clouds and create interesting shapes. And that's also because that also why I did let some margins, some blank area on the borders of
Hmm.
anticyclone. It's it's because I wanted to let the hair go through the painting. So that's the meaning of this little gimmick. And yeah, that's it, I think.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I've noticed that. I was cycling through a bunch of the mints actually last night, and I kind of feel like this like psychedelic feel to them. Also, I know you mentioned, when you're in a plane, you're kind of looking down and you see all the different clouds, but I think it's just like you do such a really good job with mixing the colors with like the flow of how the shapes kind of, I don't know, it's obviously not a coder myself, so it's one of those things where I just appreciate it, especially when you have those function like the interaction where you kind of use the arrows to
Mm,
start with like shape one all the way down to like the final mint, what
yeah.
it looks like fully rendered. And I'm curious to know, actually, is that something that was always intentional when you created the project, or is that something where you said, let's out of the blue, you're like, hey, let's just see how this is going to be formed over time, over the seven, I think it's what, seven shapes or the
Yeah,
seven
yes,
steps?
yeah, 7 steps, yeah, maybe 8. But yeah, it was not at the very beginning, but I think like 2 months into the project, or like I want people to see how it is built, because I don't want, because I am like a web developer myself, and like I need interaction. We are on a medium where we can interact with. So I'd like to take advantage of this and um, amplify, enhance the piece, where the piece becomes like as many, like you can read it once, and you're like, okay, that's a good picture, I hope. And then you start playing with the keys, and you're like, okay, so that's how it is built. And then I think you have a second reading of the piece, and that's how I wanted to the viewer to experience the
Hmm.
thing, just not as a plain image, but more as something that is living. Yeah.
Great. And then I do want to talk a little bit about the palettes, which I think are just you execute them really, really well. Like, how did you go about selecting the palettes? And then I do want to talk about how you went about selecting the inspiring women named behind each color palette as well.
The color were a nightmare, because I spent so much time on colors. It's at some point I'm really like obsessive with colors, I would say. And as soon as something is not quite right, even something like I don't know what, I just like throw it away. Like let's just do it again from scratch. And I think I did that maybe 10 times over the project. Like I don't know how many palettes I created at the end, maybe 40 or 50, I think. But the whole meaning was to have a good harmony between all of them. So that's what was quite challenging with those palettes. And and I liked, I made Dragon just before Anticyclone on FXH, and I try to give a personality to the dragons because I like to give something like of me into the piece, and I try to do the same with Anticyclone with the names because I got super like angry, yeah, like pissed when I discover why tornadoes and hurricanes were named after mostly women names, like horrible reasons. So, and I try to to counterbalance that into my work. So, okay, my work is about good mood and good stuff, good vibes. So I'm gonna use women names as something good, not something bad. So I try to look for inspiring women that inspire me through, life or else. And there were like a lot. And it was really super hard to came down to like 20 something names. But yeah, it was mostly essential to me to be able to give something human to my computer art. So that's how I try to inject something of me, like my inspiration, my passions into the colors, into the palettes. So basically, to say an anticyclone can have a personality, can speak.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Now I'm really glad that you went that route, and I remember seeing the tweets actually where you basically went through each color palette and then
Yeah.
explained like the person behind it, which I thought was super thoughtful. So for anyone that hasn't seen kind of that deep dive or explanation but behind each palette, we'll include the tweet in the show notes so that people watching this have like something to look at. So another thing I do want to talk about are the features that you've kind of showcased in this project. A couple of them were graphite, time, paper, and guide. Can you tell us just a little bit about those features and what they do or mean in this project?
So liquid the graphite was I think the very first version of anticyclone that I prototyped because I wanted to get this pen, I don't know how to say, this pencil look into my work because I just love color pencils when I just work on paper, and I wanted to translate that to have this aesthetics into my work. So the first thing I most of the time I work either with a black and white palette or with like a Mondrian palette. And those two palettes are my go-to when I prototype and when I try new stuff because the black palette forces you, like the black and white palette forces you to pay attention to your value in your composition. So if everything is the same value, then the composition will not work for me. So that's how you try to have rules and make them work together. So that's a good way to experiment and make sure that everything is right. And at some time, I just love the pencil look basically. So I just try to create it again with code, and then I started the colors. But the graphite is more about because this is the really beginning of the project. I wanted to put it in it, but because I love color way more, this is just a tiny part of the project. So like, okay, that's because this is the very origins of the project. So I'm putting in, but then there's the color taking much more space. Then Time. Time is what we're more about thinking about how Anticyclone look by night. Pretty dark, but like yeah, but let's mix it up. That we're creative, so we can put light in clouds.
Mhm.
So that's what I tried to have to again like to remember that it's coming from nature. There's day, there is time, and things look different in those times. So that's where this feature came from. Then the paper. I just love paper basically, and then I have so many type of paper at home. It's a bit too much, actually, I think, but maybe not. Ask my girlfriend. But what I love is like the same stroke will look different on different kind of paper. I think that's a super nice natural feature that we have with traditional media, that the media is actually going to render different with the same tools. But if you put something different or underneath, it's going to look different. And that's just magical to me. And I just wanted to prove that with code. So the same strokes will look different on different kind of paper that I made up. And cold press and hot press are like two big different type of paper. So I wanted to take those and try to make them with code with no texture at all. So it was quite a challenge as well. So it was both challenging and both rewarding, because I think I succeeded in it. So I was quite proud of it.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
the last feature, what was that?
Guide.
Yeah, the guide. So the guide were more about giving some structure into the work, because the like the painting is very organic, and sometimes I was feeling like it's slipping away, and I wanted the eye to stay focused on the composition. So I started initially with like a guide of 3, because this is a very typical common composition type in art, like the rule of 3, and it just eases your eye to stay focused on the piece, and it helped the reading. And then I just started to experiment with more guide and how they look and are they beautiful. Does it help the composition? Does it help the reading? So the guide is more about design more than art, I would say. Yeah, in the piece.
Okay, excellent. I appreciate you sharing that. And then also, obviously we're in a digital space. I'm curious to know, for this specific project, how do you prefer the art to be displayed? Is it something where, it's more better done digitally? Because I know you have those different, so like 7 different scenes basically, or different pieces they can kind of cycle through, or, maybe it's a combination of the two. Do you prefer print? What are your thoughts on that?
I think the device I want doesn't exist because I'd like to let it as digital but displayed physically. And so far there's not much device that can achieve a really good retranscription of something digital into like a wall or something. It just starts to blur everything. It's not crisp. It's not really high res as much as a print today. So I'm happy with both today. Like if I can get a super huge screen, super high res in a physical space, I think that's the best for me. Uh, but I quite like print as well. So I try to have both, and that's how I build the algorithm as well to take into account the prints. So from the very beginning, it was like, okay, I'm gonna print this. So I'm gonna make everything I can that it should look great on print as well. So it was quite challenging, yeah, to find the good values and the good sweet spot between, okay, it has to be good on printing and good as on the screen as well. But yeah, and what I don't like with prints is that it just limits the work itself. Like, it just can't render perfectly something. It will always compress something, or like a tiny pixel that is making a difference, it will just squash it. So there's compromise. There's compromises, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did see on Twitter, I don't know if it was a couple of days ago or a couple of weeks, but you did a test print that you shared on Twitter. Is there any news on when and if, prints will be available for collectors?
Oh yeah, there's so many prints at home. So many tests, because I'm trying to figure it out about the maximum size I wanna get. Like basically, from what size does it start to degrade the piece? Like, when does it look ugly? What size? So I'm kind of making my mind about it. I think it will be probably A1 size. And above that, it will be super. I think I will need to make changes into my code to make it look good on, bigger than that.
Mhm.
But the prints tests are going well. I'm going to work with Artist Code, with Sofia Garcia and Jesse Cooper, about this, so they will help me to provide those prints to the world, basically. Yeah, but yeah, I think it's coming soon. Like, I can't say anything, but maybe like 3 weeks, something like that, under a month, I would say.
Okay,
But yeah,
awesome.
I want, like with everything I do, to I want it to be perfect as much as possible before releasing to the world. So it always takes so much time.
Yeah,
But yeah,
absolutely. Well, I'm glad that you're taking the time with it. I know that's something that, artists are very like specific on how they want their art to look. So I don't think there's
yeah.
anything wrong with that. And I'm also curious, if you're talking about prints or digitally, have you ever thought of, and I've talked to other artists about this and their projects, but your project has 7 steps to get to that final rendering. Have you ever thought about, printing out all 7 steps and then having them side by side so you can kind of see the progression of the art over time? Or is that
I
something?
think that I think that would be perfect. Basically, I'm not sure every steps will look good on paper though.
Mhm.
But I think into the context, within the context of like an exhibition, I think it will be perfect. This kind of
Yeah.
setup. Yeah,
Cool. Well, I hope to see. I always look forward to seeing some of this art in person. So I hope that we see some of your art, whether it be in those 7 steps or in the medium of your choice. But yeah, super excited to kind of see that play out over time. And are there any mints that you're able to share with us that kind of surprise you, or any of your favorites that you can share with viewers?
um about favorites, I don't have really favorites because I spent so much time on this project that basically
Yeah.
everything is my favorite. But I can share like two memes that I wasn't expecting at all.
Yeah. Please.
Um, Share screen. So basically, this one.
And what specifically about this piece kind of you know
So all the guide one were supposed to have a lot of uh, hair going through it to help reading, but I don't know what happened here basically. But it's super like dense, like super dense, and the color just start to merge between themselves and create new colors. So I was like, what the fuck happened? But that's so cool because and this one as well, it's the same situation. And those are the two that I wasn't expecting like at all. And this one is even like more obvious. Like there's so many details that I wasn't expecting. It's so dense and compact. I was like, okay, that's a big anticyclone. That's a really dense one.
Yeah,
So yeah,
no,
those two were really unexpected. Yeah.
those are both beautiful pieces. Yeah, so for this next part, I appreciate you talking to us about, Anticyclone. I think that's been so fun to kind of, know about the features, know about a couple of the ones that kind of stuck out in your mind. But yeah, for this next part, it's something a little bit new, and I wanted to try it with you. It was like, it's called, I'm just calling it Twitter Breakdown, basically, where you're able to bring up some of the tweets with, maybe some sketches that you've been working on in the past, and, maybe you can just talk to us a little bit about those pieces.
Yeah. So I have some. Let me share my screen again. Up. So those tweets. What do we have here? Oh yeah, this one. Obviously, I think a lot of people saw this one. It's my pin tweet, so I hope so.
Yeah. Are you able to share your screen?
Oh, I'm not sharing.
Nah,
Okay.
you're
Oh,
fine.
I didn't hit the button. Up.
There we go.
Up. Up. Let's just go here. So this one really, I think, started something for me about really like trying to merge really my generative art systems with traditional media. And so this is not traditional media like real paper and paint. This is like a digital painting that is imitating really well acrylic. And then, well, not that much, but then I made a bunch of tweaks and then a bunch of custom brushes, and then it looked like that, but it's not real paint. But I enjoyed some of this process, and it taught me to just slow down when you make something, because it takes so much time to paint, basically. It takes so much time. So, and at first I was really uncomfortable with this, because generative art is a lot about iteration and finding something new into your code, and yeah, making things emerge themselves from the code. And with this, it's a bit of the opposite. It's more about making something really, like really, I would say, like a sketch, because I basically just did output only the outlines of the grids, and really only the keyframes, with no interpolation at all. I just wanted to try to interpolate myself and make the smooth easings myself by hand and just with my eye. And that's what came up, and was like, okay, that's cool. I'm gonna make a bunch more. And I did, but yeah, that was really the beginning of it. And I'm really proud that I tried this experimentation, because it just actually taught me about myself. So I'm really glad. And because I love colors, it is a super good way and to just experiment, put some paint onto the canvas and see what happens. How can they communicate together? Is the harmony respected? Is it too bright? Is it too saturated? You can experiment so much that it's really a good exercise for me to just come back to this now and then and make something new, because there is always something new to make and to discover with colors. So yeah, really good one.
Cool. I love that. I love that so much. I just think you did a really good job also with the colors, kind of, I love how you have like the little palettes at the bottom so people know like the different palettes that you're kind of working with.
Yeah,
What's
I think that was actually for me. And at the end, I was like, okay, that's cool to let it. But it was more for me, to be able to pick the right color more quickly, to go to the color picker and pick something else. So it was just basically, okay, I'm just gonna put those colors at the bottom and just pick the color pixel, and it helps so much to go faster in my process. But at the end, I was like, oh, that's actually looking good. So just let it.
cool. I love that. Yeah. What's the next suite you want to talk about?
Next one, this one. Which one is it? Oh, yeah, this one I started quite recently. I don't know, 8th of June. So yeah, like 8 days ago. And yeah, this one was more about something I was talking earlier about just how can you interpret your environment. So I was just playing with my hands and a bunch of objects and with a light and trying to observe what was happening within the shadows. And like, okay, that's something cool happening. And I just tried that to code it to make something cool. And we're like, okay, how can I abstract this idea? So I started to experiment with a bunch of cubes, basically. I can show you this. No, not this one. This one. So I just
Oh wow.
coded this a bunch of cubes in with just some lines, and I just exported this, printed it, and just started to paint over, and that's what came in. So take your color pencils and just draw and
Mhm.
just interpret what you see and what shapes can you see within all this mess, because there are so many things happening, so many intersections that at some point I didn't want to color every bit of intersection like he. I just wanted something abstract and simple to read. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna, merge this one and this one and make it one color and see what's happened and repeat the process as much as possible across the screen and see what happened. And it just gave this, and I was like, okay, that's cool. Actually, I think I have something. And yeah, maybe that's the beginning of something else. Maybe not. I don't know. There's so much stuff that I throw away, but maybe. Why not?
I love it. All right, let's check out the next one you got.
Next one is this one. Which one is it? Oh yeah, this one. It's basically the same. But then I try to go a lot more detailed and how to say, like, so far, like for the past 10 years, I trained my mind to generate stuff with code and make stuff, like learning to code and making shit with it. And like quite recently, maybe like 4, maybe 5 years ago, I started to take some brush and some pencils again and try to practice with real paper and real paint. But I feel that I'm quite behind if I have to compare to my coding stuff. So I wanted to have like an exercise, maybe, to be able to train my wrist to make super tiny shapes and to be precise, well, and to not like go over the other shapes and what happened if you color everything, and what happened if you do that, and what happened if you do that. The bad thing is that my wrist is sore now because this was a lot. That was a lot, and my wrist wasn't prepared. But I enjoy it so much, so I think I'm definitely going to do that more because just keep keep the practice going on of putting paint on some paper, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of just experimenting, and I'm sure you'll
Yeah,
develop needs.
and the underlying thing that I made. So I made this. So I made like a sketch with code, and a lot of time I just don't color it. I just try to color it on the way. I just play with value again. So okay, I have some darker gray, some middle gray, some lighter gray. So that just allows me to be more free when I want to apply colors. So I'm not stuck. I'm not stuck with some a color scheme. I can just do whatever I like, as far as I respect this value that I put in. So yeah, that's the process.
Great. And then let's check out the last tweet that you have. We're
Last
gonna talk about.
one. This one is quite old. Yeah, this one happened during lockdown. I was really bored. So I tried to make everything like a one thing every day during the lockdown. And I tried to learn a new software as well, because I'm crazy, I think, and I like to hurt myself. But the whole idea was to create some really basic stuff, and how can I make it beautiful? And it was really a really good learning experience. I think that's where I started to really how to say, get a sense of getting a crafted texture into my generative work. I think it all comes from here. This one exercise during the lockdown, because I just wanted, like, from scratch, from like a white canvas, digital, make it look like it was hand drawn or printed. And it was really, again, a game of observation. Okay, take some paper, look at it for straight 30 minutes, and just notice things. And okay, there is some variation in the paper, and blah 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 and blah blah blah. And we're like, okay, now how can you translate this into into the software you just about about to learn? And it was mostly about finding your way through the software. So it was a good learning experience, because when I open a new software, I'm so overwhelmed with every button, everything, every possibility that you can make. But once you're focused onto something, it becomes super easy to look what you're looking for, to know what you're looking for. So you can just, Google it, and how can I plug this thing into this specific context? And it really helped to, yeah, to wrap my head about how to generate texture dynamically without any resources. So a really good experience, yeah. And I was quite proud of the patterns, of the patterns I created as well, from the super complicated one to simple one. So yeah, it was really pretty good.
Yeah, I think you did a really good job, just kind of exploring these different techniques, and like you said, just trying something new. It looks like every day. And speaking of tools and techniques, is there any tool and technique that you're kind of hoping to learn and use for future projects?
Not really. I would say I just wanna get better at traditional stuff. I think with coding is more about context and situation, because I know there is a solution for anything, into the coding space. So I'm more like taking the problem one at a time when it comes in, to look for something new every time. So maybe tomorrow I want to I don't know, experiment with, I don't know, like remarching or whatever crazy shader stuff that I don't know about yet. I know that I can learn it, because and my head is used to learn this kind of stuff compared to my arm, my wrist that is really not used to draw a lot and paint. So that's, I think, mostly the one thing that I wanna keep practicing a lot. Yeah, making my wrist less painful when I draw and paint, basically.
Cool.
Um, yeah.
I love that. And do you have any, exhibitions or exhibits or, galleries or, projects planned for the remainder of the year, or what is the, the rest of 2022 look for you?
Uh, I think I can't say, so I'm
That's
not sure I
fine. Yeah,
can.
yeah. If you can't,
But yeah, a bunch of stuff are happening. Um, that's tough because a lot of stuff are happening, and I'm only human, so I can't do it all. So I have to make hard choices. But yeah, I try to be as much as possible present. That's tough. Yeah, but
yeah.
hopefully I will try to be into one or two events. Yeah, at the end of the year.
Okay, great. Yeah, definitely have to look forward to that. And the next thing I want to share is or ask is, mental health. I always ask this all the artists. Mental health is so important in this space. Everyone is, especially for artists, got to be tough because constantly working, trying to like perfect, so to speak, your project. Like, how do you, once you're done with a project, how do you wind down, or maybe even during the process of coding a project, how do you kind of look at mental health? Like, what or do you do anything to kind of help get in that zen or focused mindset?
Uh, I think mostly it's about getting offline. Yeah, get offline basically because internet is too much. It's too intense. At least for me, it's too intense. So I like to completely disconnect and do something else and get into my zone of creating or just enjoying an activity outside, sports, doing whatever that keeps me away from coding. But yeah, I think it's really a good thing to discuss because especially within the crypto NFT Web3 Web5 thing, it's really hard to disconnect because this thing is going on 24/7 basically, and and to me it exposed me, so I have a bunch more visibility now that I wasn't prepared to have, uh, and basically people from around all over the world will contact you at any time, and if you wanna follow everything you're just gonna get nuts like crazy, and at some point you need to just say it's okay to not be here and for like 3 or 4 days like in a row and come back and everything will be fine. Maybe you'll miss some drops, but it's okay, it's not the end of the world. So yeah, that's mostly it's like try to have a healthy life
Mm,
outside of the computer because the computer is so much draining. It's like looking at you every time, looking at it, and so much, yeah, draining.
yeah,
So yeah, try to be outside, basically,
yeah.
outside of
Well,
it.
yeah, absolutely. I completely agree, and I appreciate you sharing all that. Well, how can people reach you, William? If they have questions or maybe they want to follow you on social media, where can people look?
Basically, my Twitter. The plan this year is to make a website. Like for 11 years, I didn't have any website, but I plan to fix that. But so far, I share everything I do. Not everything because it will be too much for you, I think. But a lot of what I do, I share it on Twitter.
Great.
So see you there. And
Okay.
yeah, I try to answer uh, as much as possible of DMs and messages, but I can't do it all. So if I don't answer in the next day or 2 days, keep waiting, please. I'll answer at some point.
Yeah, you're only human, so I mean, then I think that's
Yeah.
all we can expect. So, well, William, I really appreciate you being on After Dinner Mints. It's been such a pleasure, talking about Anticyclone and going over some of those tweets and some of those sketches that you kind of built over time, and just learning about your background. I really appreciate you being on.
Thank you for having me. It's a good, it's good to talk about stuff because you're so isolated. It's Web3, but it's web isolated as well. So it's really good to talk to people, to see people. So thank you for inviting me. It's really great.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, on next week's After Dinner Mint show, which will be released on July the 20th, we have generative artist Steganon. Finally, we have a weekly newsletter that gets delivered once a week with information on upcoming drops and generative art related news. You can find a link to the newsletter in the description of this YouTube video. Thank you again to William for joining me on After Dinner Mints. For anyone that's tuning in, make sure you comment, like, and subscribe to the Art Blocks YouTube channel so you don't miss an episode of our weekly show. Thank you again to William, everyone tuning in. Be kind to each other, buy what you love, and we will see you all next week. Thanks, everyone. I hope you have a great day.
Bye. See you.
Thanks, William.